Good morning, ma'am. My name is Ojashwini. My Tech Talk topic is about the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility is a foundational principle in economics that explores how individuals pursue and derive satisfaction from consuming goods and services. It posits that as consumption of goods and services increases, the additional utility or satisfaction gained from each additional unit tends to diminish. This concept is rooted in the idea that individuals have varying levels of needs for goods. As these needs are fulfilled to a certain extent, the incremental value of each additional unit decreases. This law is essential in understanding consumer behavior and decision making. It not only helps explain why individuals allocate their spending across different goods and services, but also guides businesses and policymakers in optimizing production and consumption patterns. By recognizing how marginal utility diminishes with increased consumption, economists can model consumer preference and predict market behaviors more accurately, ultimately contributing to more efficient resource allocation and economic decision making. Diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as a person consumes more units of goods or services, the additional satisfaction or utility derived from each additional unit tends to decrease. This is because individuals tend to satisfy their most urgent needs first, and as consumption increases, less urgent needs are satisfied, reducing the marginal utility. Negative marginal utility. In some cases, consuming additional units beyond a certain point can lead to a negative marginal utility, where the additional unit reduces overall satisfaction or even becomes undesirable. Utility and decision making. Marginal utility plays a crucial role in economic decision making, especially in consumer choice theory. Consumers typically allocate their expenditures to maximize total utility, prioritizing goods and services that provide higher marginal utility until diminishing returns set in. The calculation and measurement. Marginal utility can be calculated or estimated through consumer surveys, experiments, or observed choices in marketplace. It helps economists and business understand consumer preference and behaviors. Utility maximization is a foundational concept in economics that describes how individuals or consumers make decisions to allocate their limited resources, such as income, in a way that maximizes their total satisfaction or utility. Understanding utility maximization. Concepts of utility. Utility refers to the satisfaction or benefit that individuals derive from consuming goods and services. It is subjective and varies among individuals based on preference, needs, and circumstances. Economists use utility as a theoretical measure to quantify the level of satisfaction or happiness that individuals gain from their consumption choices. Marginal utility and diminishing returns. Marginal utility is additional satisfaction gained from consuming one or more unit of a good or service. It tends to diminish as consumption increases, reflecting the principle of diminishing marginal utility. As individuals consume more of a good, the marginal utility typically decreases because the most urgent needs are satisfied first, and subsequent units provide less additional satisfaction. Consumer choice and budget constraints. Utility maximization theory assumes that consumers make rational decisions to maximize their total utility given their budget constraints and preferences. Consumers allocate their income across different goods and services in a way that maximize the total satisfaction derived from their purchases. This involves comparing the marginal utility per dollar spent or marginal utility relative to price across various options. Equilibrium condition. The equilibrium condition for utility maximization occurs when consumers allocate their spending such that their marginal utility per dollar spent is equal across all goods and services purchased. This means that consumers are allocating their budget in such a way that the last dollar spent on each good or service provide the same additional utility, ensuring that no further reallocation of spending would increase the total utility. This is called as equilibrium condition in the law of marginal utility. The consumer demand and demand curves. The demand of goods and services are plotted in a curve to understand the necessity of the consumers in a better way. The utility maximization theory helps explain consumer demand behavior and the shape of demand curves in economics. Demand curves slope downwards because as the price of a good decreases, consumers buy more of it due to increasing marginal utility per dollar spent. Conversely, as price rise, consumers reduce their purchases to maintain utility maximization within budget constraints. Applications in economics. In the business strategy, firms use insight from utility maximization to understand consumer preference and adjust product offerings, prices, and marketing strategies to maximize consumer satisfaction and revenue. In the public policy, the policymakers consider utility maximization when designing policies related to taxation, subsidies, welfare programs, and consumer protection. Policy aim to enhance consumer welfare by aligning incentives with individual preference and maximizing overall social utility. Critics and assumptions. Critics of utility maximization theory argue that it relies on simplifying assumptions such as rational behavior and consist preferences, which may not fully capture the complexity of human decision making. Additionally, measuring utility and comparing preference across individuals can be challenging as subjective factors and context-specific influence play a significant role in consumption choices. Individual versus social utility maximization. Individual utility maximization. This focus on how individual consumers allocate their resources to maximize their personal satisfaction or utility. It involves decision about which goods and services to consume based on preference, prices, and budget constraints. Social utility maximization. In broader economic context, policymakers may aim to maximize social welfare or utility across the population. This involves considering the collective benefits and cost of policies such as taxation, subsidies, or public goods provision to enhance overall social well-being. Short-term versus long-term utility maximization. In the short-term utility maximization, consumers often make decisions based on immediate needs and preference, optimizing their utility given current income and market conditions. In the long-term utility maximization, this considers how consumers plan for future utility by saving, investing, or making decisions that affect their long-term well-being. It includes decisions about education, retirement, savings, and durable good purchases. Behavioral economics and boundary rationality. In the boundary rationality, recognizing that individuals may not always make fully rational decisions due to cognitive limitations or behavioral biases. This field examines how deviations from strict utility maximization theory occur in real-world decision making. Dynamic and intertemporal choice. Intertemporal choice. Consumers make decisions across different time periods considering how current consumption affects future utility and well-being. In the dynamic optimization, economic models analyze how consumers adjust their consumption and saving patterns over time to maximize the lifetime. Utility and non-monetary factors. While marginal utility is often discussed in terms of monetary value, example, how much satisfaction a consumer derives per dollar spent. Utility itself is not limited to monetary factors. It can encompass psychological, emotional, and social dimensions of satisfaction derived from consumption. For example, consuming certain goods or services may provide social status, emotional well-being, or personal fulfillment, aspects that attribute to overall utility but not directly tied to money. Monetary value. Time and timing effects. Marginal utility can vary over time and with timing effects. Immediate consumption of a good might provide higher marginal utility due to immediate satisfaction or need fulfillment compared to delayed consumption. Timing effects also consider how the timing of consumption relative to other events can influence the perceived utility derived from good or service. Cross-cultural variations in the marginal utility. Cultural values and preference. Consumer preference. Different cultures may prioritize and value goods and services differently based on cultural norms, traditions, and social expectations. For example, the consumption of certain food, clothing, styles, or luxury goods may hold varying degrees of importance across cultures. Perceived utility. Cultural beliefs and values can influence how individuals perceive the utility derived from certain products. For instance, items that symbolize status, prestige, or spiritual significance may carry higher utility in specific cultural context. Economic development and accessing of goods. Income levels. Economic disparities and income level across countries affect consumers' ability to access and afford goods and services. Marginal utility considerations vary based on purchasing power and the relative importance of basic needs versus discretionary spending. Luxury versus necessity. In less developed economics, basic necessities such as food, shelter, and healthcare may dominate consumer spending patterns, while in more affluent societies, discretionary spending on luxury goods and experience may increase. In conclusion, exploring cross-cultural and international considerations in the context of marginal utility reveals a complex interplay of economic, social, and cultural factors that shape consumer behavior and preference worldwide. Cultural value, economic development levels, and varying perceptions of utility all influence how individuals prioritize and allocate their resources across different goods and services. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for business aiming to penetrate global markets efficiently. It involves adapting market strategies, product offerings, and pricing strategies to resonate with diverse cultural norms and consumer expectations. Moreover, policymakers must consider these factors when formulating regulations and policies that impact consumer welfare, trade relationships, and sustainable economic development. Thank you.